Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Joshua Lim. I am your China Studies in English teacher. So today we're going to learn about what H2 China Studies in English is about. Okay, many of us know that China is the longest continuous civilization. Longest continuous, not the longest. Older civilization, you have the Sumerian, you have the Egyptian, you have the Mesopotamian, etc. All these are much longer than China, even the Indian civilization. But in terms of the longest continuous history, yeah, it is recognized that no other civilization can beat China lah. So if you want to talk about the entire length of the Chinese civilization, that will be about 5 to 6,000 years at most. Yeah, so the Chinese call themselves descendants of the dragon, 龙的传人, if you know Chinese. Yeah, but there's a history behind this. But again, this course is not about history. This course is not about literature. This course is not about traditions and the language of China. It's about China as a modern nation. So China sees itself as the Middle Kingdom. Yeah, so as a modern nation, China is very much shaped by its own self-perception based on its cultural conditioning over the past 4 to 5 millennium, and also how China has positioned itself as the Middle Kingdom for at least since Qin Shi Huang period. Qin Shi Huang is the emperor, the so-called first emperor of China, the emperor that actually united China. Qin. So the kingdom of the name of the kingdom is Qin. The title of the kingdom is Qin, and hence many historians believe that the word China, Qin actually comes from the word Qin kingdom, the Qin dynasty. So for that 2,000 years, China has always seen itself as the Middle Kingdom. Middle Kingdom means in the known world, China sees itself as the most important, the most central kingdom. So in other words, when we are looking at China today, we are not just looking at China in its current national interest, in its current geopolitical situation, yeah, in the challenges and the development that we are looking at China right now, how China is dealing with them, how China is growing, etc. All of China's policies are very, very much conditioned and very, very much better understood by how they view themselves historically. Yeah, so this is one part of China which we will cover, but of course, a large part of it is about ongoing events and ongoing choices made by the Chinese government today. Okay, and from 1949 onwards, China has turned communist. Yeah, so if you go to Tiananmen Square, you will see this very big banner lah. So 中华人民共和国万岁. Okay, so for those who do not read Chinese, it's okay. Your paper is marked by Cambridge, so whether or not you know Chinese is irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. So fret not. So the banner on the left hand side basically mean long live the People's Republic of China. Yeah. And then on the right, this is the interesting one. 世界人民大团结万岁. So this one means long live the unity of global citizens, the global people, the people of the world. So this is ideological. So they are very much, at least officially, very faithful and adhering to their communist ideology since Mao Zedong's time. So the guy in the center is Mao Zedong. It's not some Chinese actor. This is Mao Zedong. In case you don't know who Mao Zedong is, he is the founding chairperson, the founder of the People's Republic of China, is the leader. People's Republic of China was founded on 1st October 1949. 1949. Yeah, so Mao today is still a very much celebrated political figure. You can see his embalmed body. Embalmed body means they treated his body. So his body didn't decompose. Of course, you must take out all the organs and everything. In the mausoleum in Beijing, yes, you can visit there. And in front of him are all the people that represents the commoners in China. So communism is supposed to fight for the rights of the common people. Yeah, so you must take note of that. Of course, now communism in China has evolved. It no longer means strictly Maoism. It means also the inclusion of market economy, capitalism as well. This we will discuss during our CSE syllabus, because China, while loyal to the ideology of communism and Maoism is a variant of communism. China cannot be entirely divorced from their ideological loyalty to this particular seemingly irrelevant political ideology, because this would mean the undermining of the power of the Communist Party in China. And if the power of the Communist Party in China is undermined, then there will be political instability. You understand, right? Now, China is such a big country, so many people. Imagine the one hand that's holding everyone together suddenly collapse. This will be disaster for China, not just for China, but also for the countries around China. Okay. In Chinese history, this has occurred a few times and is entirely disastrous. Okay, but since we are not studying history, so we will not go into all of this. But take note that the dilemma is, on one hand, they cannot abandon their communist ideology. On the other hand, they cannot stick to their communist ideology dogmatically. Dogmatic means you don't care about the reality. You just want to stick to your belief, word for word, idea for idea. They can't do it, because if they do that, for obvious commonsensical reason, Chinese economy will falter, the people will be unhappy, China will become one big fat North Korea. No pun intended. Yeah, so if China becomes one big fat North Korea, this will also be disaster for all of us, and even more so for the Chinese people living in China, because they'll be going back to our friend Mao Zedong's time, and Mao Zedong's time is not really a happy time. It's actually a nightmare for many people. Yeah, so their regime will also collapse as a result of popular dissatisfaction. Yeah, so the government is trying to strike a balance here, keeping it but not entirely following it. So how did they do it? How did they do it? Interesting, right? So this one we will cover during our lesson. Okay, so when it comes to CSE, when it comes to China, have you ever wondered? So all of these things that we see in China, right? We see old things like Confucius, we see new things like McDonald's and Western influences, yeah, and even Western movies, not just Western, because when we talk about the influences that are coming from outside China to influence the Chinese people, usually we call that modernization, and Westernization is only a part of modernization. Agree or not? You must agree with me, because this is the fact. Also, you have influence from K-pop, influence from J-pop. Yeah, even in the early stage of their opening up, they are influenced by the dramas made in Singapore as well. So in the early period of China's opening up to the 1990s, even the early 2000s, in fact, Singaporean TCS, last time we call it Singapore SBC, Singapore Broadcasting Corporation, and then now you come TCS. Our local actors and actresses, when they went to China, they become very popular. So China is absorbing a lot of influences outside, but the Chinese also have their own influence. Not only the traditional influences, but also communism as well. China has their own brand of communism. So today, the Chinese culture and the Chinese society we see comes from many of these seeds of influences. And they, nevertheless, being very innovative and being very proud people, they have evolved their own current form of culture and society. So many of us who have been to China, we can observe one very salient feature of how the Chinese behave and how the Chinese believe today, which is actually a more cosmopolitan kind of Chinese culture, which is uniquely theirs. So they wear hanfu, but online they also have their jargon. They also have their C-pop, right? They also have their C-drama. Their C-drama is wonderful. So some people switch from J-drama to K-drama to C-drama. Yeah, and you go to their Douyin, you go to their Xiaohongshu, all of these social media is very exciting as well. So it's very uniquely China, and it's becoming more and more creative, more and more exciting, and you can see the sunset, happening in the industries, the entertainment industries of Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Of course, very few of us we are watching our own shows nowadays. We are looking at China, Korea, Japan, or even Hong Kong. Yeah, so Chinese modern culture, modern values has eclipsed many of the more modern and internationalized influences that they have been traditionally receiving. So you see the paradox there. So China is becoming stronger and the society is becoming more heterogeneous. Okay. Okay, so how about Chinese geography? Okay, so this is one aspect of CSE we'll be covering. So they are all together 4 aspects. Okay, so I talk about the more simplest one. The simplest, we are talking about social, we are talking about culture, we are talking about their population, we are talking about their demographics, and here we are also talking about their geography. So China is a very huge country. You have northern Chinese, you have southern Chinese, you have the Yellow River, you have the Yangtze River, you have the coastal provinces, you have the inland provinces. Are all the Chinese the same? Are all the Chinese the same? So we must look at how they are shaped by their environment, how they are shaped by where they are located. And we are not just talking about Han Chinese, we're also talking about minorities Chinese. So you have Chinese in the term that the Chinese people use is a nationality, not like Singapore or Malaysia. When we talk about Chinese, we are talking about a race. To them, Chinese is a nationality. So you have Han Chinese. Han Chinese is 92% or 91.4%, depending on which statistic you favor. And then the rest are all minorities. China has about 55 minorities. Together with the Han, they are all together 56 ethnic groups in China. And they are all very different. Even among the Han, even if you look at Tibetan, you look at Xinjiang, you think, wow, people living in Tibet, people living in Xinjiang, the Uyghurs, the Kazakhs, maybe the Uyghurs are homogeneous, maybe the Tibetans are homogeneous, maybe the Mongols also are homogeneous. No, they all have their sub dialect group, sub ethnic group. So this is very complicated, and the way they think, the way they behave, traditionally has been shaped by where they stay, where they live historically. So we're going to look at this as well in our CSE, so you can see how exciting this is. Okay, we also look at the leaders and the politics of China. So these are the leaders of China after China opened up. Okay, so China has been a conservative country, a closed country, just like North Korea today. Okay, but it opened up from Deng Xiaoping onwards. Mao's time already start to open up, but Deng Xiaoping is the one that make this full-fledged. Mao, towards the end of his life, already feel that he should make peace with USA. He should make peace with Southeast Asia, but he didn't do this in a major way. He do it in a subtle way because he represents the orthodox communist ideology. If he do this in a very official way, he will be discrediting himself. So I hope you understand this. So it was left to his successor, Deng Xiaoping, to do it in a major way in 1979, 1980. After that, Deng Xiaoping is succeeded by Jiang Zemin. Jiang Zemin is succeeded by Hu Jintao. And Hu Jintao is succeeded by the guy on the right, which is our friend Xi Jinping. Okay. But for your CSE syllabus, we do not need to talk about Mao. We do not need to talk about Deng Xiaoping. We do not need to talk about Jiang Zemin for the at least before 2000. Yeah, we'll mainly be focusing on actually Xi Jinping because your syllabus is an updated syllabus. Cambridge values your input on the most updated facts and the most updated evidences that you can provide for your argument in essays and case studies with regard to China today. Okay, so fret not if you are not a history buff. Okay, and China is very big. China got 1.4 billion people. 1.4 billion people. This is currently the largest in the world. But I will have to say that China's birth rate is dropping very, very rapidly, very, very rapidly. India is going to catch up very, very soon. In absolute terms, I'm not sure whether India today is bigger than China, but very, very soon India overtake. Maybe India has already overtaken because there are a lot of unrecorded, unregistered birth in both China and India. And India, I think the one that they have the most. Okay, there are reasons why Chinese population are diminishing. This we will cover in our lesson as well. Okay. Other political challenges, we'll be talking about challenges from minorities, as you can see on the slide, as well as the people unhappiness, especially during the COVID period where they are repressed. Okay, they are repressed so that China can accomplish their zero COVID target, meaning as low a number, a casualty from COVID as possible. Yeah, so that the government can show the people and show the world that they are very, very effective. But this comes at a cost. Many people were unhappy. Okay, so we'll look at that as well. We will also look at aging population, corruption, and also how rule of law is sometimes not well observed in China. So these are the major issues faced by them. Okay, and we'll also be looking at the Chinese economy. In fact, this is the crux of why China today has become a global power, because the world respect China primarily for the economic role that it is playing. Yeah, not just in East Asia or Southeast Asia, but as far as in Europe, Africa, Latin America, and China is very important market for them. And China is also a very important exporter of the goods and services that they require, right? Even your iPhone, our iPhone is made by China, our Android, our Samsung. Yeah, and currently you see e-vehicle more and more. BYD is a Chinese company, a Chinese car. BYD is the most popular seller of car in Singapore today, the most popular brand, yeah, of a vehicle bought by Singaporeans today. And in fact, in many places, more and more Chinese products are becoming more popular. But nevertheless, China is having their own trouble. Their troubles are a lot. This we will cover during lesson. And we also be talking about China becoming more confident and more assertive as well. So this is not just how should I put it? This is not just China, becoming richer, China becoming more united, the people becoming more confident, but also China is becoming more and more louder and louder country. China is not ashamed. China is not stepping back. China is trying to revive their former historical glory as well. So this go back to my first point where I just briefly mentioned how, because of their historical conditioning, China is still very much behaving or thinking like what it traditionally has been conditioned to think and to do, because of many reasons. And one of the reason is the geography of China. So this one we will also discuss during our lesson. But for this particular key issue, where we talk about China's relationship with the world, this is primarily covered in your year 2. So this one you don't have to worry. But this is also the most exciting of all the 4 themes of our syllabus. Yeah, so we also be talking about how a rising China what does a rising China mean to the world, especially to Singapore, to our region, because ultimately this subject is enacted by MOE, which is a government ministry, and when the government enacted a subject as such, it is meant for our country, how people like us, especially for yourself, students, how well you are prepared for a world, for a century that's going to be quite different. In fact, if you look at the current affairs today, if you read news, even the social media, you can see that the world is changing very fast, right? Very fast. US-led order is slowly diminishing in their credibility as well as in their influence. Look at how Canada has restored ties with China, and Europe also, formerly anti-China, now Macron and all the other leaders, they are welcoming Chinese investment. So there's something significant happening there. Okay, all these questions will be addressed in H2 CSE. So I welcome you to take this subject. Yeah, if you are very keen to know about current affairs, yeah, if you are very interested to know about, what make countries behave the way they behave, and how do countries manage their challenge or their challenges, and how do all this affect us. Okay, the key issues are therefore, so I conclude, these are the key issues, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, on the syllabus, the key issues will start with Chinese economic development and sustainability, followed by Chinese government, followed by Chinese society and its transformation, and then foreign policy. Okay, and then we have a foreign policy there. Sorry, my face blocking the foreign policy. Okay, but you can look at the original slide. I think you should be able to see the foreign policy. Okay, but when we cover this, we will start with Chinese society first, and then followed by governing China and its challenges, theme 2, and then we will move on to theme 1, Chinese economy, and then we will end with theme 4, China's foreign policy. 1 and 4 will be covered in year 2, 3 and 2 will be covered in year 1. Okay, so you can see that this is a very hybridized, a very comprehensive subject that train all of us, including myself, because when I teach, I also learn, train all of us in the thinking of economists, of a political scientist, of a sociologist, and also of a journalist when we talk about international affairs, of a political analyst, of an international affairs analyst. Yeah, so when we go through the training of China studies, when you go through the training of China studies, you're not just learning about China as a country, you're actually trying to understand and communicate that understanding that you have of the world through the prism of China. So we are actually learning how to assess the world. Your writing, you'll be writing like a journalist. You'll be writing like a journalist with a lot of independent views from yourself, actually valued by Cambridge. So Cambridge do not want to see just a descriptive narrative coming out of you when you answer all these questions. Cambridge wants to see, wants to know, what do you think? What are your personal views? And do you have support for your personal views or not? Ken? Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, see this is an interdisciplinary subject that focuses on all of these wonderful areas that are useful for you. Yeah, even university, they're moving towards this direction. Yeah, they're moving towards the direction of not just studying history for history's sake or geography for geography's sake. So more and more interdisciplinary. And if you're a science student, then science and art, how you see things from the different the different portion, the different sections of your brain, how you utilize our intelligence, how we utilize our intelligence in its totality. Ken, so this is very relevant. And you may wonder, hey, what is the difference between this and economics, or what is the difference between this and history, China studies and history? When I go to university, will I be better off taking economics, or I stand a better chance of going to the course I want, taking CSE? So which one should I choose? And I can tell you whether you're taking economics, or whether you're taking history, or whether you're taking CSE, or whether you're taking job when you go to university, these are all the same. Okay, credits are taken. Okay, I can be a non-econ student, okay, studying CSE, history, and maybe another human subject. And then I go to university, I want to take econ. So long as my aggregate meets the criteria, I will definitely be accepted into econs. Can, of course, your portfolio and all that. So there's no distinction between humanities subject. Okay, so we'll be learning all of this only over the China that we know after 2000, not historical China. So fret not. Okay, what will you gain? So you gain all these things, so many things you can gain. Wow. Okay, like big buffet like that. Okay, so this one you read on your own, because as I went through the introduction just now, I also touched on most of them. Yeah, so you can read through them, and these are all very useful life skills for your future. So in the future, you want to be a policy maker, you want to be in the think tank, you want to work in civil service, okay, you want to be at the management, making decisions that are long-term, strategic, and impactful. China studies will equip you with those skills. Okay, so how does our class look like? Okay, so I'm talking to you now. This is not a class. This is more like a lecture. Okay, yeah. But sometimes when we are in class and then we are going through some very difficult and challenging topic, and you're not equipped with the adequate content to address this question, I will also speak to you like how I'm speaking to you right now, so that you are ready for the task given to you. Okay, so our CSE class, we value questions. So you must ask questions. Okay, I will ask you question also. You don't ask me question, I will ask you question. Because this is for our own good. If we are not driven by question, that is very scary. This means that we are not thinking hard about what we are learning. Okay, we also be debating and constructing arguments. The argument is not the same as idea. Argument means you want to bring across a certain point, which is probably an aspect of a debate, and you plan to win this debate, or you are hoping to counter a particular point of view, a statement of belief that has been traditionally held. So you need argument, and with argument also we have counter argument, right? So CSE lesson is full of talking, discussing, and also whether or not you are able to communicate all of this in your writing. Yeah, and one more thing, we have started to embark on the e-exam platform, meaning your exam is by typing, okay, for about 2 years already. Okay, evaluate materials from different perspectives. You'll be doing exercises that are similar to your social studies case, your social studies, the case study, or your history SBS, yeah, or your job case study as well. So you'll get sources from different perspectives. We'll learn how to read, we'll learn how to interpret, and we'll learn how to assess. Okay, there will also be experiential learning, role playing in class. We'll also be going on enrichment learning journey as well. And we're also looking at in the class, you have a learning group, learning team to support and to encourage and to challenge each other. Okay, how does A-level exam look like? There will be 2 paper. One is paper 1 and the other one is paper 2, only 2 paper. Traditionally, we have 3 paper. Third paper is a research paper. Many of the seniors survive that and they find that this is very, very useful for them. But the feedback came back that no, this is also very time consuming. And for many reasons, MOE decided that there shouldn't be a paper 3. So we now only have 2 paper. But the paper 1 is a more taxing paper compared to your seniors paper. You have 2 case study, but these 2 case study test different skills required for understanding documented sources critically. So we'll go through them, so you don't worry about these 2. They are hybrid of job skills, history skills, and your SS skills. Okay, SS skills, of course, is at A-level. Job and history skills at A-level, and SS skills is at O-level, sorry. JC don't have SS, don't have social studies. We will go through this, we will learn this step by step, and also we will go deeper. So the thinking and the skills required for each of these case study questions is going to be more than what we have done in O-level, in our history and SS. And then we have essay, okay? So if you're interested to know what the paper actually look like, you can come to me to find me. I'm at staff room level 2. Okay, my number. So you want to take a pen, you can pause your video now. Take a pen. My number is 97478629. 97478629. Yes, I'm Mr. Joshua Lim. Okay, I'm be very, very happy to answer all your questions. Be very, very happy to talk to you and to know you personally. Yeah, and you are my investment. Yes, you are going to be very, very dear to me. Okay, want to find out more? You can scan this. Okay, I think this one is the SEAB syllabus. Okay, yeah, it's the SEAB CSE syllabus. Okay, so you look for the syllabus outline that states, the exam date is, the exam year is 2027 because you're going to take your A-level in 2027. Okay, most of us. Okay, you can also access this video. Actually, this is redundant. This video is actually the video that you're watching now. Okay, I'm the guy in the video and this is the video. Okay, thank you very much. 谢谢你 and arigato. Okay, and thank you very much. And I hope to see you in my class if you are interested. If you are not interested in CSE, I wish you the best. The best. Okay, JC is very, very short. And I hope you make full use of your time here. It's actually not even 2 years. It's only about 1+ year. You will make friends, you will see things, you will learn things, and they are different from your previous stages in life. And I truly wish you the best, and may your stay in JPJC with all of us here be one of the most memorable moments of your life, in a good way, memorable moments. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.